What's up, movie nerds and basketball geeks? Welcome back to Movie Ball. What do we got brewing up today? What's in the kitchen stirring up a ruckus? I don't know what that means, but on today's episode, we are doing a full MCU ranking, 23 movies, one man, if that's what you would call me. I've always wanted to do this. The MCU is one of the most recognizable brands in pop culture, so hopefully people will fucking type up MCU Ranked and my video will pop up and it'll boost my likes and views and comments and all that shit because people like to watch this stuff. And I like making them, so you know what, let's just get this out of the way. We're gonna have different opinions, our lists are not gonna look the same, but that's what makes this fucking fun! So don't be a dick! I'm nice! Let's get started. At the very bottom, coming in at number 23 is a movie that I despise, and that is Thor. This is probably a shock to a lot of Marvel fans out there, but in all honesty, if I could just be honest, I hated this movie. Now, it's not regarded as one of the MCU classics, but it's still generally liked by most of the movie-going audience, and I just am not in agreement whatsoever. It's very boring, slow, and painfully, cringingly unfunny. Kat Dennings took this movie from like a 5 out of 10 to a 2 out of 10. I'm not kidding, I hated this movie that much. She is just so out of place and not funny. Dear God. And the Norse mythology, it just didn't work for me. Nothing in this movie did. It pissed me off. That's why number 22 is, you guessed it, Thor: The Dark World. This sequel basically implanted the idea that this character is just not meant for solo outings. At least they hadn't been translated well up to this point. It's not as bad as the first. It's not a good movie, but it didn't piss me off and annoy me to no end like the original did. This movie is just kind of there. It's just the movie that Endgame tried to give more value to, but ultimately it's very, very forgettable. Number 21 is this year's Captain Marvel. An immense letdown. I was ridiculously amped for this movie. After Infinity War, I was like, yo, this movie is gonna be crazy! And it might be the most straightforward and bland movie the MCU has to offer. I'm not sure if it's the director's fault, but Brie Larson is a stoic and emotionless bore in this movie. I wanted to like this character, but she's so dull in personality, and I get that there's a whole, memory erasing aspect part of the film, but fuck you. Her powers are, never really explained. What can she do? What can she not do? I don't know. There's nothing intriguing about her when she's just so completely invincible and one note. Of course, when she shows up in the climax in Endgame, I'm like, yeah! But that doesn't necessarily make Captain Marvel an intricate character. It feels like this movie just tried to copy and paste the MCU formula into her debut, and it just didn't really work with the story. The humor is almost always forced and unfunny, and there's not that many cool action sequences considering the gravitas of this character. At the very least, this is the first entry on my list where there are some positives to take away from watching it. It's not a good movie, but whereas the first two Thor movies, there was just absolutely nothing redeemable in them for my own taste. Number 20 is one of the most forgettable MCU movies, and it's so universally known as being the forgettable MCU movie that you probably know what I'm talking about, and that is The Incredible Hulk. There's a lot of reasons why this movie never really felt like it was a part of the MCU, and the obvious one is that we have Edward Norton as Bruce Banner instead of Mark Ruffalo. Mark Ruffalo is the guy, he's synonymous with the MCU and the Hulk at this point. He's been doing it for years. The only actor out of the big screen adaptations of the Hulk to do it numerous times. A change of a mainstay actor in your franchise is going to be an awkward experience. And Edward Norton is a great actor, but he just never really fit the Hulk in my eyes. He's so skinny and bony that I just never really saw him turning into this giant green muscle. Secondly, it just doesn't really mesh tonally with the rest of the MCU. And honestly, that's fine, that's fair, that's not their fault, it's expected. This movie was probably shooting at the same time as the first Iron Man, so they didn't have their kind of personality for this entire universe mapped out yet. There's some fun to be had with this movie, but it's not consistent or entertaining enough to make much of a difference, especially looking back on it now. Coming in at number 19 is hands down my most controversial placement on this list, and that is a movie I find really subpar in Black Panther. Unlike Captain Marvel, Black Panther is an extremely cool and interesting character that is rooted in this unique world of Wakanda, but unfortunately the movie is just very boring throughout most of its runtime. Everyone likes to give the MCU shit for like all of their origin stories being carbon copies of each other, and I don't really feel like people mention Black Panther in that regard because it's not an exception. The title character must fully become himself and learn who he really is and eventually fight that evil version of himself. And I'm sorry, but Killmonger was just atrociously overacted by Michael B. Jordan. Is this your king? I'm your king! I don't know, just stuff like that. It seemed exaggerated and cheesy, and Jesus Christ, the what are those joke. I mean, I don't think I've ever cringed that hard from a line of dialogue in a movie, ever. Number 18, Captain America, the First Avenger. I've come to the realization that the first phase of the MCU really wasn't all that stellar in my opinion. 3 out of the 4 origin stories were pretty underwhelming, and that includes Cap's first outing. This movie isn't really bad, just pretty lackluster and slow. It didn't capture my attention like I wanted it to, and this was before the MCU really exploded, so there weren't like gargantuan expectations for it either. The only real highlight and positivity to take away from this film, in my opinion, was the fact that Chris Evans gave us a very good example of what he's going to bring to the table as Captain America, and he did it fantastically. He's great. At number 17 is Iron Man 2. I don't detest this movie like most people do. In fact, when I first saw it, I was not only under the impression that it was better than the first Iron Man, but that it was just like amazing. There's a good movie somewhere in here, but yes, unfortunately, it spends way too much time trying to set up the Avengers. It underutilizes a pretty cool villain in Whiplash, and there's hardly much of any action in the film. There are problems that bog this movie down, but it's hard not to enjoy the dominant screen presence of Tony Stark. Number 16 is where the movies start to reach an above average level, and kicking them off is Ant-Man. I was very eager for this adaptation, coming off a huge success of minor characters that no one's ever heard of in the Guardians of the Galaxy. Paul Rudd was cast as Ant-Man, a character no one's ever heard. I was just like, wow, Marvel's gonna tackle this? I can't wait. I'm a comedy guy. That is my genre. I couldn't contain my excitement, and that's probably why I find it to be a fine movie. It doesn't hit the level of laughs that I want it to. It doesn't do much in the way of action, and again, it's a rather disposable story as it's got that cookie-cutter MCU origin tale. But there's just a sense of fun and quirkiness with Ant-Man. Even if it's not top-tier MCU, it's still an amusing adventure. Number 15, Iron Man 3. This movie is odd for a lot of reasons, and much like Iron Man 2, after my first initial viewing with it, I thought it was very, very good, but, going back to it, it's considerably stupider than I remembered. I liked the Mandarin shit. I thought it was a funny twist. I'm not into the comics. I don't read them, so I don't really give a shit if it, you're like, oh, it's just that at this point, you then don't have a compelling villain. Aldrich Killian was just so stupid. I mean, he breathed fire. At that point, it was just like, no. And aside from that, there were, at times, unbelievable amounts of corniness in this movie. There were points where it was just, sitcom level, two broke girls, unfunny, because they push so much humor on you that, a lot of it is bound to miss. But there are cool ideas. Tony's PTSD is a neat narrative to explore, there are some dope action scenes, and it can be hysterical at times. There is good in here, more so than Iron Man 2, but it's just that it's not as great as you want it to be, and that makes it a disappointing way to round out this franchise. Number 14 is back to those insects in Ant-Man and the Wasp. There is just something about this franchise that pulls me in. It has a goofy charm to it, and it's not an amazing movie, and it has one of the dumber plots of the MCU, but it's just funny and chill. It's not a big deal, but we were all like, how the fuck is this gonna play into Infinity War? And once Scott got stuck and trapped in the quantum realm, once everyone disappeared, that was sick. Number 13 is Doctor Strange. What a cool character. He was made cooler by the last 2 Avengers films, but still, he had a rather good debut film. Copy and paste, cookie cutter origin story, yada yada, yes, that's all true, but just that world that's built for him, that concept of his powers, it's so attention grabbing and bizarre, and that final battle is just so unique. Yes, it might not fit that need for explosions and a grand finale of a climax, but it was a nice change of pace. It was something different and fresh. At number 12 is the movie that almost kicked off the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Tom Cruise, Iron Man. Yeah, Tom Cruise was almost cast as Iron Man. Look it up. I swear to God. I was never in love with this movie like most people, but I was very fascinated with what this film and Marvel Studios was able to accomplish. They took a B-list superhero that in 2008 nobody really knew and turned him into one of the biggest, most recognizable superheroes of all time. I would say more so than Batman in this modern, current generation. They absolutely nailed the casting of Robert Downey Jr., and that's obvious at this point, but you couldn't in a million years do a better casting job for anything. It would just be the impossible odds, all while revitalizing his career. As a movie, there's a lot to like, but I do think upon multiple rewatches that there is some slower parts. There are scenes that drag, there are chunks that it's just like, can we get on with it? Can we get to something cooler? But at the end of the day, the MCU delivered with its first picture and made everyone excited for the crazy future of it all. Number 11 is this year's Spider-Man Far From Home. I liked this movie, which is a disappointing phrase for me because I wanted to love it. Don't get me wrong, it's solid all the way through, but it just never really packed that punch. Never really. That's how I punch in a fight, I guess. Like if I got into a fight, like I'd get so fucked. Mysterio is an awesome character. The relationship between Peter and MJ, although completely disregarding his feelings for Liz from the first movie with no explanation whatsoever, is charming, and the post-credit scenes, amazing. But it never quite made me laugh hard or consistently, and it just started to feel like a repetitive mixture of scenes throughout the film. Class trip, MJ, Nick Fury, Mysterio, class trip, Mysterio, Nick Fury, MJ, class trip, MJ, Mysterio, class trip. You see where I'm going with this? It just kind of felt like it was going back and forth rather than really progressing anywhere, but still a fun and lighthearted movie well until the credits. I actually have a theory about this whole Marvel-Sony debacle, and maybe I'm a lunatic, but I actually think this is an entire marketing stunt to make everyone think that Spider-Man is out of the MCU when in reality he actually isn't. At the end of Far From Home, spoilers! Peter's identity is revealed. Everyone knows that he's Spider-Man, and I just feel like they are hatching this plan where, you know, he goes into hiding, like he just fucking completely disappears, and they wanted to give off this notion that Spider-Man is not in the MCU, he's gone, he's just completely gone. Stay with me, right? Okay, so they announced the upcoming slate of Marvel movies for the next phase, and Spider-Man, there was no Spider-Man movies to be seen to feed into this idea that he's really gone. So, like, they ended on this giant cliffhanger, so everyone's like, where's Spider-Man? He's gone, he's gone. But he's not. Stay with me. They announced his departure from the MCU, that they split, that Sony, they came to a disagreement after everyone had already seen Spider-Man Far From Home. Everyone already saw it. Everyone knew the ending. It was it happened like a month after the initial release date of the film. I feel like they're up to something. I'm telling you, of course, this isn't true. Like, what the fuck? Like, no, it's not like that. Okay, so number 10. Number 10 is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Very exciting sequel, miles ahead of the original in my opinion. It just had more captivating characters, better, more memorable action sequences, just a smart story overall. The Russo brothers came into the MCU with a bang. But this is considered like a staple of the MCU. When this movie came out, people were like, this is the superhero movie that's going to change everything. I mean, I don't know if they said that, but basically when it came out, people were like, yo, this is the superhero movie that shows that superhero movies don't just have to be superhero movies. They could be so much more. And I just never really grasped onto the idea of it being a classic, but it is a very good movie with a ton of rewatch value. Number 9. This is where things start to get turned up a fucking notch. Captain America: Civil War. Let me start with a few little issues. At times you can start to feel the weight of this runtime in the giant pool of characters, and perhaps it's never as epic of a superhero showdown as we're promised, but this movie still slaps. Even if it's memed as Captain America's slight confrontation rather than Civil War, the airport scene is still amazing. The ideological differences between the two leaders of the Avengers in Iron Man and Cap are astounding to behold. And this is just a movie that had your expectations through the roof, and it was still able to deliver on them. At number 8 is Thor Ragnarok. What a 180 this franchise did. I mean, you saw what I said about the first two Thor movies. I mean, I was not excited for this. But Thor 3 is so different from its predecessors in every way. It's funny, it's colorful, it's bright, it's different, it's weird, it's out there, and it's just a ton of fun. Okay, that is not what the first two Thor movies were. They were bleh. Landing at number 7 is a movie a lot of people seem to not like that much, and that is Avengers Age of Ultron. I couldn't fathom my expectations for this film. It kind of had this like kick-ass vibe to it in the sense that I knew Kick-Ass 2 was never going to be as good as the original, so I was able to enjoy it for the fact that I didn't get my expectations that high. So I kind of had the same idea going in with Avengers Age of Ultron. I was like, okay, I love the first Avengers. I'm not going to let this, ruin it. And although it's not as good as the first Avengers, it came pretty close. Ultron is one of my favorite villains in the MCU. People seem to be displeased with his more comedic side rather than a dark and brooding evil that was kind of assured in the trailers, but I thought he was funny and badass. Just amazing action overall once again. I was able to forgive the kind of general same plot line as the first of someone trying to take over the world and the Avengers have to fight a faceless army to defeat them, but at the end of the day, I was able to forgive it for the sheer fact that this is just a movie that is action-packed and fun as hell. At number 6 is where we start to get into the best of the best in the MCU, and that brings us to Spider-Man Homecoming. Such a blast from start to finish. It didn't bore us with the origin story, it didn't waste our time, it was just an ultra funny and fast-paced high school coming-of-age comedy disguised as a summer superhero tentpole. Just a terrific villain played by Michael Keaton, the best incarnation of Spider-Man on the big screen, and just a totally fun 2 hours. Number 5 is Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, this movie is just an injection of entertainment that courses through your veins throughout the whole film. Incredible, star-making casting in Chris Pratt, an absolute awesome hodgepodge of zaniness, quirkiness, and insanity fills the screen at every turn. In 2014, Guardians proved that the MCU could do whatever they want. It took me a couple of times to really come around to this. I always liked it a lot, but after a few more viewings, I started to get more laughs, more entertainment, more action out of it than I had the first couple of times around. The more I watched, the more I picked up. It's just such a fun, great cast, incredible director, super fun time all around. Number 4. Where does that take us? Everyone's like, what is missing? What else is there? Number 4 is this year's Avengers Endgame. At this point, it's almost like if Endgame isn't your favorite movie in the MCU, then what the hell's wrong with you? I mean, these last 4, they were just so close. It was really hard. They were all right there. It's a must-see cinematic event that will probably be, at the end of the day when it's all said and done, my favorite movie of 2019. An insatiable amount of action, characters, fan service. Endgame really was about as perfect of an ending as you can get. Number 3 is Avengers Infinity War. I mightily struggled between the placement of Infinity War and Endgame, but I think that what it came down to was just enjoying the pacing more of Infinity War. I think Infinity War is better because there are so many goddamn characters that are for the most part handled and balanced extremely well. Sure, there are some characters that are more important to the storyline, but there is just always something happening in each scene at like a monumental level. Endgame needed its slow build-up. I think it works great that way, but Infinity War is just always moving, and it brought us Thanos in full force, in full glory, where he was more so sidelined in Endgame. As perfect of an ending as Endgame is, that final 5 minutes of Infinity War, although undone by the events that transpired, just so pivotal to cinematic history. Number 2 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I have never in my life, not with Infinity War, not with Endgame, never before seen a more fully packed, crowd-pleasing dose of fun than Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I said Guardians 1 was like an injection of entertainment coursing through your veins. Guardians 2 multiplies that by 100. Every single scene is either hilarious, action-packed, dramatic, emotional, world-building, or all of them at once. There's just so much always happening. It's always doing the most to try and entertain you, and I don't understand how you could ever be bored by this movie. It's just so fun. I love this movie to death. It's a slam bang of hysteria, explosions, emotion, music. Just my second favorite movie in the MCU. That leaves number 1 to be The Avengers. People are probably like, how? How is this better to you than Infinity War and Endgame, which probably makes the original Avengers just look so minuscule in scale compared to how giant they are? The Avengers was the first time anything like this was put together, okay? Weeks away from the release, people still couldn't fathom that this was actually happening. Marvel did it. They hit a fucking grand slam. To this day, every time I watch that movie or even think about it, I get this undeniable excitement. I start to process, how did they even make this? How did this all actually come to be? I can't believe they did it, and they did it so well. It's incredible. It's revolutionary. It's one of the best superhero comic book movies of all time. It's everything a comic book movie should be. That was my entire MCU ranking, which is all going to be pointless once Black Widow comes out. But hey, it was a lot of fun to make this ranking because everyone sees these movies differently. Everyone has different opinions on what they think about these films. And it's just, it's just such a big part of pop culture that it was a lot of fun to do. Like, comment, subscribe. I mean, Jesus Christ, please. Like, I put so much effort into these videos for an average of 50 views. Are you kidding? I'm grateful for all of those views. Even if 20 of them, 40 of them are mine, it doesn't matter. I'm grateful for everyone that's watching. It means a lot. Smash that like button like a bug that's in your basement. Just stomp on the thing and kill it and then start to feel bad because it probably had a family and it was just living its life and you're much scarier to it than it is to you. So, you start to feel bad and you cry because you're like, oh my God, I just killed something. It was just living, it was minding its Just trying to think, like, what would be a good last clip to make you laugh, before the music starts. Not this one. Of course, I'm going to use this one.